This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, coming to you live from the podcast layer. And I had a last-minute change, but I am thrilled to have the person before me because one of the central problems for Fresno County is the fact that education's failing. I am joined by a candidate that I think can make a real difference for that, Dr. Johnny Alvarado, running for Fresno County Superintendent of Public Instruction?
Superintendent of Schools.
Superintendent of Schools. That's right. I get the state one and I get the two mixed up. Superintendent of Schools. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Okay, so some people have never watched, never heard anything about you. Define the job.
Will do.
What are you running for?
Absolutely.
Because it's a job where a lot of people have no idea.
You know, that's an interesting point you just made right there. I've asked hundreds of people now, and just a handful might understand what the position and of the role of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools actually is. And I think that's something that we have to talk about more, is why is that? And
well, it's because it's been silent.
Yeah.
I think if there'd been more active leadership, we might know differently.
I would agree with that, and that's what I want to bring and to change. When you ask the question about the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools and what the primary role is, it's defined in part by three main roles and responsibilities. The first is that the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools and its team approves the district budgets, the local control accountability plan, which is something that needs to be built at the district with parent input, with student input, with staff input. And it's all about how we're going to make our schools better and our district better. And the county superintendent of schools has the role and the responsibility of approving it and can also disapprove it if they find some misalignment, I guess is a good word to use. And it goes back and forth until it's a solid plan. The second is to put support structures in place for special populations. So as an example, when incarcerated youth are sent to the Juvenile Justice Center, it's the responsibility of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools to provide an education to those students. And then the third, Eric, is what I believe has been amiss for a long time, and that is the accountability factor. In fact, when you go on to Ed Code 1240, it specifically details the roles and responsibilities. And the very first sentence that you read says, superintend the schools. And when you define that, as you continue to read, it specifically talks about, and I'm summarizing this, that the role is to keep watch, to evaluate, to monitor, and to hold all schools accountable to student achievement.
Well,
without actually running the everyday operations of the school district. That is left to the school district superintendent.
So not only are you supposed to inspire them, you're also supposed to bring a sense of responsibility. And then I would think ideally you would be able to align all of the different ways they're evaluating students. Because I know that's one of the problems is we've got very different school districts that are doing very different things, and it's hard to tell where kids are at if they're all defined a little differently.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that. You know, recently there was an advocate for one of the candidates' campaigns who made reference to an idea that I'm talking about. First of all, thank you for making reference to the idea that I'm talking about. And that was the idea where what I want to bring to the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is a way for us to be transparent about the journey of our students' educational school year, academic transparency, and their success or their challenges. We will not know if we're not collecting data that gives us a clear picture. And so I'm basing this idea on a simple fact, and that simple fact is this. We do not test on the state assessment our kindergartners, our first graders, or our second graders. You know, some might say kindergarten's too young of an age. I think there's room for conversation about that. We also do not test our 9th graders, our 10th graders, or our 12th graders in the area of reading, writing, and math, language arts and math.
Why would you need to do that? I mean, we've got social promotion. That takes care of it, right?
Yeah, well, that's another thing that I'm talking about, right? And I know you know that. But that's where a lot of these problems begin to take root, is because we continue to advance our students year after year, prepared or not. Now, what I'm not saying is that we automatically need to stop social promotion. That would be too much of a burden on the system. But what I am saying is we need to recognize that this is a problem and we need to start addressing it. And here's one way I believe we need to address it, and it falls in line with what you're saying and what the advocate of one of our other campaign candidates talked about, kind of poo-pooed this idea, if you will. And the idea is based on the system that already exists. Here's the system that already exists. At the end of the school year, we give a state assessment by grade level, 3rd through 8th grade, and only our 11th graders in language arts and math. And then we collect the data, and then we look at the data after the school year is over. Kids are gone for the summer.
So it's already too late.
It's too late, right? It's too late. There's probably some things we can learn from, but not about how do we make it better for our kids during the school year because it's already passed.
Or a particular kid.
Particular kid, groups of kids, however we want to look at that, right? So that system already exists. What I'm saying is let's take a system that already exists and let's make it more relevant to the actual during the school year for all of our grade level students. So that looks like this. I'm just going to give a quick example. Let's take 3rd grade. We make a common assessment that all 3rd graders in Fresno County need to take. Maybe they take 2 of them at the 3-month mark, at the 6-month mark. That's getting them ready. It's aligned to the state assessment. So
it's early enough you can address it that year.
That's exactly right. So at 3 months, we figure out how did we do as a county. And, we might have District A that did really well for their 3rd graders. And we might have District B that said that didn't do so well, but now they get to talk to each other because now there's common language around a common assessment, and we can grow from each other. And right now, that's a missing element at the monthly district meetings that happen with district superintendents because there is no common data that they're able to look at during the school year. So,
So you can't highlight successes. Not that you want to highlight failures, but we still have to identify them. And both of those need to happen for us to move forward.
Yeah, I always want to highlight successes, but we always want to grow from the deficiencies that we're experiencing and noticing. And what better way to do it than during the school year, right? So that we can make some adjustments that need to happen.
I have some stats about Fresno County that are kind of disturbing. The state's unemployment rate is about 5.3. Now, that's always a moving target, depends on when you look, but let's call it 5.3. But the unemployment rate for this county is more like 9%. A third of all of the kids live below the poverty line. Meaning, when I say kids, they're at some point when they reach about 5, they're going to be in public schools or private schools of some sort. We've got a 20% poverty rate. You've got some school districts or some areas of the county that are at 35% poverty rate. You've got very few people that have secondary education in a lot of communities. 43% approximately speak English as a second, they speak something besides English in the home. If you don't have a good command of English, how do you succeed? So we've got all of these things that are happening in our county, and I believe education is the path to change that. So what do? Because people are frustrated.
Sure, absolutely. So, I was that kid. Our entire family was that family. We grew up in poverty. We lived in a very challenging neighborhood. And today I sit in front of you, an educated person, a person who's running for the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. And when I look back at what was the difference, education was the difference. I had a pretty good command of reading, writing, and math growing up. And that is what carried me across all finish lines and through all obstacles that I may have experienced. And so I get to take all of that experience and that energy. I call it energy because that's what continues to drive me, is I understand, not to suggest that others do not, but I understand personally, not just through theory, the study of it, but the experience of it, that an education changes the lives of people. You talk about unemployment rate, you talk about poverty lines. Education can change all of that. What I want to do is I want to take the experience of the last decade that tells us we have not been focused the way we should be on how we're making a difference, not only for our students, but giving our teachers a chance in the classroom to be successful with their kids that are in front of them. And what I mean by that is this idea of social promotion eventually catches up. If we continue to move kids on when they're not prepared for the next grade level, and again, I'm not suggesting we hold them back. What I'm suggesting is we need to be more proactive on getting all of our students closer to being ready at the next grade level if they're not already there, so that our teachers have a more viable opportunity to be successful in teaching, right? Here's the example. Take any grade level. I'm going to look at an 8th grader. 8th grade class, math class. It's the start of the school year. 7th graders just got promoted to 8th grade or advanced 8th grade. And that teacher will have 30 plus kids in his or her classroom. Some will be at grade level. A couple may or a few may be above. But you're going to have a lot of students that are below grade level. Maybe 1, 2, 3. We really sometimes don't even know how far below they are. That teacher is given the task to be successful for all students. And Eric, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's very challenging.
Well, they almost have to teach to either the middle or the bottom.
I would agree with that. In order to be successful, right? And that's not even talking about what ends up happening when a student is disengaged because they're
right,
not understanding.
That's without behavioral issues.
But now add the behavioral issues in play, right? So when I talk about social promotion, this isn't something that that the answer is just early literacy program. It's important, and I understand it very well like our other two candidates, but that's not the only answer. We have to cover all grade levels because it's a problem that all of our teachers are challenged by.
I know you've referenced this before. Margaret Mims did a study, and I'm going to let you tell about the study that she did in the jails here in Fresno County and the link between success or lack of success in education.
Yeah, I think it's actually in alignment with the data you were talking about that we experience in Fresno County regarding unemployment and below the poverty line. Right, what she was looking at doing, and her team, she was the leader of the organization, so this is what her team was doing, and that was to get a better understanding of the number of inmates that we have on a nightly basis, which the data would show 2,500 inmates on a given day. And this is something that's been going on for some time now, a couple of decades, if I'm not mistaken. And what we found was that, or what the team found was that the average grade level, right? Average means some are higher, some are lower, but the average grade level of all of the inmates, 4th grade reading level. And so we have to think about the correlation and perhaps causation of why our inmates are in there. Does it have something to do with a low-level reading ability, which makes it challenging not only for maybe going on to higher education, but also a job and being successful at a job? I can't tell you the number of business people that I've talked to now that are talking about what's coming to them in terms of an employee. And their inability. They are, and so are community colleges, right? The number of remedial courses that they have to have on community college campuses, CSUs, UCs. And so this is something we really need to begin to address in our K-12 public education program.
There is no doubt about that. So the incumbent for this position, and she's running again, she says she's on year 3 of a 10-year plan. I understand that probably you have to have a 10-year plan, but there doesn't seem to be a ton of urgency. How do you think she's doing? What would you do differently?
Well, I mean, I think we all need to look at the data. And what the data tells us, I talk about the last decade, but let's look at the last 3 years. And the last 3 years shows an average percent change in reading, writing, and math, just a click above 1%. Of improvement, right?
But in the last 3 years, I mean, just let's go back 3 years. In that first year, just the fact that all the schools were reopening should have been more than 1%. I consider that a failure.
Sure. And some schools had some success and other schools maintained and maybe didn't recover as quickly as others. But when we're looking at the data, which we all should be looking at data, everybody, businesses do it. Right, they're not waiting until the end of the year to determine if they're making a profit. They're looking at it on a monthly basis, maybe even a weekly basis, maybe even daily. And so when we look at that, we need to ask the question: is 1% growth average every year enough for our kids? I say no. I say it is not where we have been. It doesn't really move the needle of what's been happening the last decade, where 55% of our kids can't read or write on grade level and close to 70% cannot do math. And so I think it's fair to have a 10-year plan, but what adjustments are we making from year to year when we're not seeing the growth that we want to see? And so there always has to be adjustments. And so what I'm talking about doing differently is I'm talking about, and who Bill McEwen asked me the question, right, in that GB Wire interview, which I have some thoughts about that GB Wire interview, to tell you the truth. He asked me the question, Johnny, are you going to be an activist in your position? I'm going to be a respectful and responsible activist, but I am going to push. I'm going to push myself first and foremost, and I'm going to push everybody to be able to start making a difference, because that's what we need, right? A leader isn't someone that his or her first ideal is to be liked by people. Sure, we all want to be liked, but that should not preclude us from pushing. And if pushing means that you might not be liked at the very beginning, then okay, then we just have to take that. But pushing needs to happen, and I'm going to do that in a way that's respectful and responsible and bringing everybody together, because we need to start addressing these problems that we've had for some time now.
Absolutely. Well, I personally don't care a whole lot whether I'm liked. I care whether I'm respected. And while that makes not everybody like me, I think it's way more important that they know that I stand for a set of principles. So we need leadership that focuses on principles and does what's right, even if it costs them something.
Sure.
I've listened to Cantwell Cofer speak a few times. I've listened to Emer O'Brien speak multiple times. Those are your two opponents. And until recently, neither one were talking with any urgency. They were like, well, everything's fine and it's moving in the right direction. For instance, I asked Emer O'Brien about social promotion. She was at a candidate forum and speaking, and I listened for 3 minutes, and she really didn't say much, and says, well, I've only ever seen one example of it in all my years of teaching. Where somebody stepped in and they did not socially promote. Once. Now, she's been a superintendent of Clovis Unified. I can't imagine there weren't multiple students where that would have been helpful to have the conversation with the parents. Obviously, the parents have to make the choice. And then she was, for a brief time, in charge of Central Unified. That never came up? And she wasn't talking about, like, this is an urgent thing where we need to identify the problem until recently. So I see that as a form of flattery for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm glad that it's being talked about more. It's important. But let me be real about something. She's being supported by two former county superintendents.
One of which I love to refer to as the ostrich of education, Larry Powell. And I say that because I've listened to him interview people running for school boards and never, ever once in 45 minutes ask a tough question. They talked about the people they knew in common and laughed and joked. The man is smart.
Yes.
This man is educated, and he understands education well, but he ran from any of the problems that had to do with Fresno Unified, because both of these people I'm thinking of were eventually elected to Fresno Unified, and he acted like everything was fine. Well, the ostriches, they have that history of sticking their head in the sand. Larry, I don't know what you're doing. You're a nice man, but come on, we need better. We can't hide from these problems. We have to fix them.
Eric, and to our listeners out there, the reason why I talk so forthright about social promotion is because I'm not connected to the establishment. And if you are connected to the establishment, you might need to be careful of the words you're using, because you don't want to upset anybody. And what I mean by that is this. When I talk about the last decade, there are people connected to that, right? And it could be even longer than that, and there are people connected to that. And on one hand, I'm happy to hear that that is starting to resonate, this issue of social promotion. And on the other hand, it's not enough. I feel I'm the only one talking about it at great length. And because I'm talking about it, and because I've identified it as a problem, I'm ready to start moving forward to solve that problem. And there are ways to do that. I'll give you a simple example. The county office of ed is responsible, Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is responsible for funding for the after-school programs to school districts, right? I have a simple question. What's the connection between what happens between 8 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a given school day and what happens in the after-school program? Are they aligned so that there's support happening in the after-school program and it's not just seen as a daycare opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be enrichment, there needs to be fun, but there also needs to be assistance where kids need the extra help. And if you don't have that alignment, so what I'm looking at is where's the plan that shows what that alignment is, that we always know what's happening during the school day so that we can support it in the after school program. That's just one example on how we begin to address social promotion. We need to start looking at this through different lenses, because the lens that we've been looking at it for the last decade has not been working every single year.
I have a question on something that Emer O'Brien went on record with. She said basically that schools in Ireland are great, and that there was this huge similarity between the Central Valley and what's happening in Ireland. What do you think of that? I know what I think of that, but I was like, huh.
I was like that too when I heard her talking about that. This is Fresno County. Fresno County is not Ireland.
It's highly diverse,
and not only it's not like Ireland in one way or another. You know, look, I happen to believe that we want to hold on to areas where we were successful, mm-hmm. and we want to be able to talk about it. But that was many, many years ago. Dr. O'Brien, my good friend Emer, had been the superintendent in Clovis Unified for about 6 years. And what her data shows, a decrease in reading and writing, a decrease in math, how do you talk about that? You know, you're going to talk about the plan you had to decrease academic achievement? I think not. So maybe that's what we have to hold on to talk about. But even then, it is not a fair assessment. Our focus needs to be on what Fresno County needs, what the problem is that exists in our county, in our educational system, and we need to be laser-like focused on starting to address that. Because in my opinion, we haven't been, and I'm not just saying that to say it, I'm saying it based on data.
Well, I have met Cantwell Kofer once. I felt no need to ever invite her on my show because I thought that she needed to not have the job. I thought that Emer O'Brien I needed to actually consider. She is smart. I attended 22 consecutive school board meetings at Clovis Unified when she was the superintendent. And so I thought she needed to be taken seriously. But people need to know that I invited her on this show 3 times. The first time she agreed and then talked about how she was nervous about social media and said she wanted to have coffee. And I went, yeah, no. I'm not interested in telling you what questions I'm going to ask. Then I invited her like a month later, and then I invited her about 3 weeks or a month ago, a 3rd time. Each time I got the response of, well, let's have coffee. Well, again, I'm not going to tell any candidate what questions I'm going to ask. I am a very busy man. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't know why she made those choices, but I know that the door was opened for her, and she chose not to walk through it. Instead of saying, yes, well, when do you film, or how can we schedule? She said, let's have coffee. No, I'm not going to do that for any candidate.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that sometimes people are concerned what questions are going to be asked of them. But we're running for an elected position, and
it means any fair question should be okay on the table. You should be prepared.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I get questions asked of me, you know, not all the time, but about my retiring from Parlier Unified School District. Mm-hmm. And I made the decision to retire. Sometimes I'm asked, were you asked to leave the district? And no, I was never asked to leave the district. I have documentation that says I submitted my retirement paperwork. It was approved by the board. But to answer your question, I don't know why she, you know, did not agree to come on to the show. I appreciate the opportunity wherever I'm asked to speak and to share. And I am appreciative of that, because this is a position that I have wanted since 2014. I didn't just wake up someday. I didn't just wake up on a given day and say, I think I'll run for the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. no one knocked on my door and came asking if I wanted to run. That did happen to one of our candidates. I have been focused and intentional about wanting to make sure that I served in many different positions, different school districts, so that I could be the best representative to serve in this role. Eric, I am the only candidate that has worked in the northern, eastern, western, and southern part of this county.
And they're not the same at all.
They are
and
not.
you've worked in large and small school districts.
Yes, I have, including Clovis Unified, Fresno Unified, Sangre Unified, Parlier, Selma. I've supported 20 out of the 32 different school districts in my positions that I've had. I've worked at the Fresno County Office of Education. I've trained in court and community schools, behind prison walls, jail walls, worked with students, worked with staff. So I have a very diverse background that allows me to be creative on ideas, on systems thinking, to be able to bring about change. And we need to start doing that in our county for the sake of our kids and for the sake of our staff. Our staff, our teachers are leaving in droves, and there aren't, there's challenge with kids, with young people coming in to want to be in the teaching profession. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand that a big major problem of all of that is social promotion. It absolutely is. If we can address that, when we start to address that, again, can't just shut it off, but being proactive about getting the support that our teachers and our students need, then I believe we begin to change that narrative in our educational system.
The job you're running for comes with a bully pulpit. In other words, you have the opportunity to truly speak out and lead. That's part of why I was attracted to what you were saying right away, because you were the only one early on talking about some of these issues, and the other two were largely talking about, well, no, it's largely fine. We just need to fix a few things from the bottom. Can you give me some examples of how you will use that bully pulpit to both unify and lead?
That's always an interesting term, bully pulpit, and sometimes it comes with a negative connotation. And I see the term bully pulpit to be very, very strategic, actually. And again, my role is to support all district superintendents and everybody in our entire county, including our parents. Now, the reason why I reference that is because it was said, I participated in a forum in Selma.
I was there.
Okay, that's right. Kevin Cookingham was the moderator.
Yes,
great guy.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. I have a lot of respect for Kevin. I do believe one of the questions he called me out in particular. But what he went on to say was that the county superintendent, he used this as an example, that the county superintendent does not have jurisdiction over district superintendents. And I would agree with that. Mm-hmm. No county superintendent can tell a district superintendent what to do. Then he went on to say that the only people that can tell the district superintendent what to do is the board members. But he failed to leave out the most important people in a community within a school district, and that is the parents. The parents direct the board members what to do by voting them into those positions.
Only if you consider them servants. And there's a huge disconnect with an awful lot of elected politicians that once they're in power, it's, well, we're going to do what we believe is best, and it doesn't matter what my constituency wants.
Right, and I get that, because that's historically been the pattern. But this is where I get to, in this role, use the bully pulpit. And one of the more important things that I'm going to do, in addition to addressing social promotion, in addition to creating common assessments, in addition to bringing support to our teachers so that we can have sound behavioral management systems in whatever that might look like. And what I mean by that is, do we have a system that supports our teachers when students are misbehaving in the classroom and make it difficult to teach and for kids to learn? What does that system of support look like for not only the teachers, but also the students, so they can get back into the classroom and be successful listeners, engaged students, and students wanting to learn? That has to be a system that we have to have in place. Because of social promotion, we've made it very difficult for our teachers to be successful, and that's one area I want to lead.
So simpler way to put that is, you want a system that is consistent for both the teacher and the student, so that they know the rules of the game, and if they blow it in this way, this is going to happen.
Exactly. There's something powerful about predictability when you know what's going to happen next. and consistency. And those two terms need to be present in whatever system we're doing on a school campus. The third is our parents, Eric. We need to do a better job, and I want to lead this at the County Office of Education, Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. I want to lead educating our parents. Some parents got it. They understand. Like, I look at my wife and we understand how the educational system works. So we've been very supportive of our kids throughout the journey, and that actually makes life a heck of a lot easier for teachers and for the entire school district.
Well, it also seemed to work because you have fairly successful kids.
We do. All three of our girls are successful, and I'm so proud of them. They've worked really, really hard. What I want to do is I want to educate our parents on how the K-12 public education system works. All things K-12 public education, including what does it mean that I have power to go to a board meeting and voice my concerns when something's not happening. We have to create the infrastructure, though, so that we can be transparent on the data that we're collecting, right? So all of a sudden, if we start sharing our attendance rates, let's just say, or suspension rates, or discipline referrals
for each school district,
then we can compare ourselves to each other for the purpose of growing together and for the purpose of responding. So if I'm a parent in District A and I'm showing that we have such a high percentage of suspension rates going on in the first 3 months of the school year, but District B doesn't, I might want to ask questions of my board members and my district superintendent. Why is this, and what are we going to do about it?
Right. Is it a gang problem? Is it a lack of parent involvement? Because, frankly, kids tend to behave much better when parents are involved.
Correct.
You know, is it the fact that a large number of the people in Fresno County, the parents, English is a second language.
Right.
So going to a board meeting might be very intimidating to follow everything.
Unless they have translators.
Oh.
And unless it's a welcoming environment. And how does that happen? We educate our parents that it's their right to be able to have translators, right? So when I talk about all things K-12 public education, I'm talking about having parent conferences with many breakout sessions that educate our parents for the purpose of being more present in their child's educational journey every single school year. And when we always hear this narrative, we need more parent involvement. We need more parent engagement. This is happening at the school sites, from staff, from administrators. Okay, let's build it so that we can start seeing how it's making a difference.
So the job you're running for, there is money specifically for specific workshops, and you would get to decide what those workshops are. So they could be about parent involvement or accountability or transparency. In other words, that's a big tool, a lever that you have to help move the county and its 32 school districts.
31 school districts, with the county being the 32nd.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Push them in a direction.
Absolutely. It's a big budget. And the primary role of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is to be a support network, a resource network for our county and all school districts therein. And so that needs to be a strategic process. And yes, we have the resources to be able to do it, and we'll make it happen.
So you've said you'll be an activist. We've talked a little bit about what that would look like. What would you start with, though? Where's the low-hanging fruit? Where can you get some wins right away?
Yeah, absolutely. So, anytime I address a problem, I do it with a team. So I probably would first direct this simple question, because it's a profound question. I believe it to be a profound question. And in talking to others, they do as well. The first question I would ask is I would put it up on a board with all of our district superintendents. I might even start first with our organization leaders within Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. The question would be, last year and for the last decade, our 11th graders have recorded being 44% proficient or advanced in reading and writing, and 44% are not proficient, can't read or write on grade level, and 74% cannot do math on grade level. What do we believe is the problem? Let's figure this. Let's talk about it. What are the challenges? Why is this happening? What do we think? What do we believe? You start throwing that up on the wall, and you start to see themes start to pop out.
Whether it's a poor school district or rich school district,
whatever it may be,
won't matter. I bet you there's a lot of similarity.
We can look it up right now and compare and find what certain districts, their percentages are. Then we do that with the district superintendents. That question requires us to start thinking about what are the potential issues that we're facing right now that is creating this data. And this data is not happening overnight. It's not just happening their 11th grade year, Eric. It's been happening their entire system in the K-12 public education. And I believe that question will begin to create the next steps in what we need to try to do. Well, a theme that might develop might be something like this. Well, it seems that we continue to promote kids every single grade level, whether they're prepared or not. Mm-hmm. So what do we got to do now to make sure they are prepared? And this is where common assessments start to come into play. This is where the behaviors in classrooms need to start being addressed. This is where, what is our system that we have on our campus that helps students get back on track to being the kind of student we need in our classroom so all kids can learn? All of these questions and these responses and this think tank that starts to happen will get us to the place to start making change. That's what I see as being an activist. And then to take it to the next level of being an activist, we have to create the transparency of it all so that we are sharing with our parents and our community how we are all doing in each of our school districts and how we're all supporting one another to be the best that we can be for our kids.
Well, you mentioned things like after-school programs, which often your job, if you're elected, provide. If you already knew where that kid was at, or the average of, say, that classroom or that school, you could tailor that, and all of a sudden you would have a way to move towards fixing this problem. Because it's not gonna. There's no magic wand. It's not all gonna change at once. But we have to try to create an environment where every kid has a chance, and those kids that are disadvantaged, and I don't consider skin color to be a disadvantage. I see income as a disadvantage.
Right.
They have opportunities.
We have to know. Knowing is powerful. Here's what I mean by that. Before I retired from Parlier Unified, a year and a half ago, or coming into this school year, so last summer, I asked our high school principal at Parlier High School, Jenna Chavez, great lady, wonderful leader at the high school, doing great things. I asked her, I said, Jenna, how many of our current juniors, it's almost the end of the school year, who are going to be seniors next year because of social promotion, how many of them, if they're on that campus all year long as seniors, are still not going to graduate even though they pass all their classes because they're so far behind in their credits? She said that number was 17 kids. Eric, if had I not asked that question, we would have had 17 high school students at Parlier High School that were not going to graduate, even if they passed all their classes. So we decided to use an ed code policy and a district policy titled involuntary transfer. That means we remove them from the comprehensive high school and enroll them into our alternative education program. Different program, smaller class sizes, more support. They can track a little bit faster in catching up with their work if they want to. We had to have meetings with parents, meeting with kids. They were tough. They were tough conversations, but we did it because we had the right to do it. By the semester of this year, 40% of those kids got back on track and were able to be re-enrolled into the comprehensive high school, and now they're going to graduate. None of that would have happened had we not been thinking about what can we do different for our kids that are struggling. This is the formula that needs to happen across all aspects of our education, including how do we use after-school program? How do we use summer school? How do we say to kids, you have to meet all this criteria in order to walk during your graduation ceremony? Because walking through graduation ceremony, it's not a right, it's a privilege. The right is you're given a diploma. You need to earn the right to be, or the privilege to be able to walk through graduation. And we have a lot of power to be able to support our kids. Our kids need parameters, and it's up to us to be able to create them.
Well, that right to walk through graduations, there's a lot of peer pressure. They want to walk.
Sure.
Whether they earned it or not, they want to. And so there's a place where you can apply pressure. Yes. And their parents absolutely want them to walk too.
Good pressure, right? I would say
good pressure.
Good pressure, yeah.
So I see the system in Fresno County. I'm sure California at large, though I have not studied California at large nearly as much. It's broken. Not unfixable, but broken. And your opponents seem to want to just get along, largely. Now I'm very happy to hear that Emer is following your coattails a bit on some of the bolder statements and approaches. But why is your bold leadership or bold leadership is needed, why is your leadership different than theirs?
I am looking at this position beyond Fresno County. And what I mean by that is I want Fresno County to be a model for other counties, not for a greater purpose. This is the job for me. Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is what I've wanted since 2014, and we are going to do it differently. But I also want to make sure that we have a North Star. There's two North Stars for me, that we start changing the landscape of how many kids are prepared when they leave high school. That's the first one. The second one is that we become a model for other counties, because I would imagine that there aren't other county superintendents that are thinking about this that I'm talking about right now. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so. And so why am I the person for this position? One, I do not belong to an establishment. I'm in it for the benefit of the students. I'm addressing the concerns and the problems that we've had for many years. Mm-hmm. I'm not attached to that. I'm attached to three main groups of people: students, staff at each school district, even at the Fresno County, and then our parents. That is the school community that we need to make sure are all on the same page on what we need to do to make a difference for their kids. I have been doing that wherever I've led. We've had double-digit increases in academic achievement, and my competitors simply do not have that.
Wait, more than 1% a year?
Yes.
Like the incumbent?
And not negative.
Huh. Well, that sounds good. So how would people find out more about you?
Sure. So they can visit me at my website on Dr. Johnny Alvarado, the number 4, FCSS.com. So Dr. Johnny Alvarado 4, FCSS.com. Or they can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's the same handle, just not the .com. So okay. Dr. Johnny Alvarado for FCSS.
We're down to a little less than a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Why are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful because I know we can do it. I know what the power is of people banding together and bonding together for a common vision and a common purpose. I have not met a person yet in education that isn't in it for the kids. I have not. There might be some that struggle. There might be some that, are tired, whatever the case may be. But that's not enough. What I mean by that is we need to lead as leaders in our county. We need to lead with such a veracity and vigor of wanting to make sure that we are creating the systems and the infrastructure that are going to support our teachers, who will then support our students. And that's the mission that I'm looking forward to do when elected for this role as Fresno County Superintendent of Schools.
Well, I certainly wish you the best of luck in this. I see this whole county, it needs change. We need bold leadership. That's why I was attracted to your campaign. That's why I'm an avid supporter. By the way, I'm not a journalist, folks. I'm a political commentator. I very much have an opinion, and I'm not afraid to express it. I thank you for coming on and joining me for this time. Folks, it's time to vote. Since my audience isn't Democrats, I won't say, vote as many times as you can, but at least get in your one vote. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist. Make a difference, folks, and have a great day.